Good morning. Welcome and thank you for participating in the roundtable session of World Peace Forum. Before I begin, I ask your understanding that for the purpose of clarity in communication, please allow me to take off my mask while I'm speaking. And same to the panelists as well. We are distant enough from each other. I just met the students in the floor, and my special thanks goes to those students who are gathering here to participate at the youth mock UN General Assembly session in the afternoon. My name is Kim Suk. I'm a former Korean ambassador to the United Nations from 2011 to 13. And I'm going to be your moderator for the next 90 minutes. We do have a screen for the panelists. Before we begin, let me briefly introduce our panelists around this table. This is called the round table, but actually you see this is a rectangular table, whatever it means. And we have 5 distinguished guests as a panelist and 1 ambassador to deliver her welcoming speech. To your right, Ambassador Philippe Turner of New Zealand, welcome, and he's currently holding the chairmanship of the Commission of UN Memorial Cemetery in Korea. And next is Ambassador Frode Solberg. Am I pronouncing right? Okay. Ambassador of Norway, and he's going to succeed the chair of the Commission of UNMCK next year. Well, welcome again. And Mr. David J. Jae, U.S. Consul in Busan. I understand he was born in Korea, but when he was very young, went to the America. Now he's the American diplomat stationing in Korea, both Seoul and now in Busan. And next is Ambassador Ho Gang-il, whose last position in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was Korean ambassador to Bangladesh. Now he's the custodian of UN Memorial Cemetery in Korea. Thank you for participating. And last but not least, Ambassador Lee Kyung-chul, who is now the Foreign Ministry's special representative in charge of Afghanistan and Pakistan affairs. Thank you for participating. Well, our subject today is from guardian for freedom to partner for development. And this year marks the 30th anniversary of Korea's admission to UN and 70th anniversary of the establishment of UNMCK. And so the subject from guardian for freedom to partner for development is very appropriate in timing and also very meaningful as it covers the title. The subject covers 2 of 3 pillars of the United Nations, which are actually peace and security, development, and human rights. Well, as we all know, UN holds a special place in modern Korean history, especially in terms of its crucial role in the Korean War. And during the war, Busan functioned as interim capital of the nation, receiving U.S. forces, military equipment, and various other assistance material as well. So Busan functioned also the critical and crucial role in waging and doing the warfare business. That's why Korea owes much, well actually our nation's survival to UN. And 70 plus years on, Korea paid back some of the indebtedness back through various forms of contributions to UN and international community as a whole. I do not intend to mention the long list of all those contributions that Korea has made. But if I may say one thing to you, it shall be that Korea produced the Secretary General of the United Nations, Honorable Ban Ki-moon. As 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, he was and still is the champion of Sdg 2030 and also Paris Climate Agreement. While the world appreciates his accomplishment, Korean people and our nation are especially proud of him for his contribution to raising Korea's stance in the world and also his contribution to humanity world over. So I'm glad to say in front of all the students back there that I wish everyone in this room please recognize the presence of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon with big hands. Thank you. Now, before we begin our discussion, let me first invite Ambassador Park Eun-ha to make a welcome remarks on behalf of Busan Metropolitan City. Before she took up the current job of Advisor Ambassador to Busan for International Relations, Ambassador Park served as Korean Ambassador to United Kingdom. So, Ambassador Park.
Good morning, Excellencies and distinguished guests. First of all, I'd like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to the Honorable Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us. It's a great honor to have you with us. On behalf of Busan Metropolitan City, I wish to extend my warm welcome and gratitude to Ambassador Kim Suk, Ambassador of New Zealand and Norway, and Ambassador Lee Kyung-chul for coming to our beautiful city, Busan. My appreciation also goes to Ambassador He of UNMCK, Council J of the United States. As all know, this year marks a historic milestone for us Koreans. The 30th anniversary of the two Koreas' simultaneous admission to the United Nations. Unlike other member states, the road to the UN for us was bumpy and full of obstacles for well-known reasons. Despite difficulties, admission was made possible thanks to the meltdown of the Cold War. Ironically, the Korean Peninsula has remained as an exceptional place where Cold War still lingers. The United Nations mission to establish lasting peace here is not yet accomplished, and we have to continue to work together to keep our joint commitment to peace on the peninsula. It is encouraging to see our partnership has been dramatically expanded and deepened, which goes much beyond the peninsula. Seoul has served as a non-permanent member of the Security Council twice and is now aspiring for a third term. We are now one of the major financial contributors to the United Nations and development assistance. Particularly, as Ambassador Kim Sung mentioned, it is home to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who made great achievements and left remarkable legacies: climate change agreement, sustainable development goals, and gender equality, among others. The stronger partnership between the United Nations and South Korea is ever more needed, facing global serious challenges, including climate change, pandemics, and nuclear proliferation, which are pressing agenda for peace and prosperity for all of humanity. As home to the only memorial ceremony for UN fallen heroes in the world, Busan has put its utmost efforts into making the notion of peace part of the city's brand, and a most important value it seeks to uphold. Organizing UN weeks every year is a good example. Today's World Peace Forum is one of the many relevant events of the UN weeks. I highly expect this morning round the table will serve as a valuable opportunity to share ideas and insights on how to navigate toward a transformative, peaceful, and green civilization era in the midst of turbulent changes, upholding the spirit of the humanity of the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Park, for your welcoming remarks and also your explanation and elaboration of the meaning and the program of the Busan UN Week. Now next, I would like to invite Ambassador Lee Kyung-chul for opening remarks. Ambassador Lee, as I mentioned earlier, is the special representative for Afghan and Pakistan affairs. He actually served, he worked with me at the Korean mission in UN. We worked very closely together while we served as the non-permanent member of the Security Council. And even though I was the figurehead, the ambassador, actually he was a political coordinator at the UN Security Council. Well, for whoever served at the Security Council, everybody knows the importance of the role of a political coordinator. He was that political coordinator and showcased the Korean diplomats' industriousness to all the diplomats stationing in the United Nations. Now, Ambassador Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for your kind words. Good morning, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to be here at this roundtable meeting organized by Busan Metropolitan City. I am particularly honored to be in the presence of His Excellency Ban Ki-moon. I'm delighted also to be with Ambassador Kim Sok, Ambassador Pagana, Ambassador Ho Gang-il, and distinguished ambassadors of New Zealand and Norway, as well as the U.S. Consul based in Busan. My current job as a special representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan at the Foreign Ministry is to deal with Afghanistan, mainly in the international context. It is a sort of UN issue, but why I'm sitting here today is probably more to do with the bonds I have with the United Nations. I joined the Foreign Ministry in 1991, the very year of Korea's admission to the United Nations. I was working at the Korean mission to the UN in New York as a second secretary. 10 years later, which was the 10th anniversary. Then I served as a UN director at the Foreign Ministry in Seoul in 2011, the year of the 20th anniversary. And now I'm here in Busan celebrating the 30th anniversary. Let me start with a quote. In the afternoon of the 25th of June, 1950, Sunday, New York time, less than 24 hours since the outbreak of the Korean War, then Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to the United States, Mr. Jang Myeon, who became later Prime Minister, spoke at the UN Security Council and concluded his statement with the following words. I quote, "We owe our existence to the United Nations. I trust that the Security Council, which is charged with the primary responsibility for the maintenance of peace, will not fail in this imperative duty," unquote. This, I think, best encapsulates the very essence of the ROK-UN relations and perhaps the very essence of the UN itself. The Republic of Korea and the United Nations have been in tune with each other from the very beginning, and they remain so now. With the benefit of the helping hand from the international community and the strong will of the people, Korea has succeeded in emerging from poverty and the ashes of war to evolve into a country with a developed economy and thriving democracy. In the year marking the 30th anniversary of Korea's admission to the UN and also the 70th anniversary of the creation of the UNMCK, this is indeed a fitting moment to reflect on Korea's engagement with the United Nations. Indeed, what Korea can do and should do, both with and for the international community, as now one of the key members, are matters which warrant profound consideration. I would like to present to you as a basis for our discussions today three of my personal observations on Korea-UN relations over the last 30 years of Korea's membership with a focus on peace and security. Those are one, an overview, two, Security Council membership, three, the post of UN Secretary General. First, looking back, the Security Council resolution, which recommended Korea's UN admission to the General Assembly on the 8th of August 1991, was Resolution 702, meaning the 702nd resolution that the Council had adopted since its creation in 1945. That shows that the Security Council adopted about 15 resolutions per year during the years leading up to 1991. In comparison, the Council produced about 63 resolutions per year in the 3 decades that followed up to this year, with the resolution adopted at the end of last month, September, being number 2,599. In other words, the last 30 years were over 4 times more productive in terms of the number of Security Council resolutions than before, with the UN collective security system being much more active and more relevant than during the previous Cold War era. Somehow, we had to remain out of the UN arena for a considerable time. But in terms of quality and value of time, the last 30 years of our membership with the United Nations were in no way insignificant. Second, over the last 3 decades, Korea has had the chance to serve as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council twice for the 1996-97 term and the 2013-14 term. The Security Council is the only international organ which is empowered to override the sovereignty of member states where necessary by taking such measures as the imposition of sanctions, dispatch of peacekeeping forces, and the authorization of the use of force. While serving on the Security Council, we were able to participate in the decision-making process on matters pertaining war and peace. The themes of our service running through our membership very much have a focus on a human-centered approach, humanism, and humanitarianism, while never losing sight of the harsh reality on the ground in conflict situations. For instance, Korea, while assuming the monthly-based presidency of this Council, contributed to the work of the Council by leading serious debates on such topics as humanitarian assistance to refugees in 1997 and protection of civilians in armed conflict in 2013. In the realm of peace and security, we as a responsible member of the United Nations have also played a valuable part in peacekeeping and peace building. The Republic of Korea is currently the 10th largest financial contributor to the UN PKO budget, as well as a meaningful troop contributing country. In addition, we have been playing an important role in further bolstering the political and logistical basis for such operations. The hosting of this year's UN Peacekeeping Ministerial in Seoul later this year in December being a clear example. Moreover, during the Republic of Korea's chairmanship of the Peace Building Commission in 2017, the advisory function of the Commission for the Security Council was developed and strengthened significantly. Third and last, the election and service of the 8th UN Secretary General was another way in which Korea contributed significantly to the work of the United Nations. Technically speaking, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who is with us today, held the position in his own personal capacity, not as a representative of the Republic of Korea. However, during the selection process for the post, national considerations were very evident, as the UN General Assembly required in its resolution of 2006 formal presentation of candidatures from national governments for the first time. The UN General Assembly Resolution 71/131 in December 2016 paid tribute to the outgoing Secretary General by recognizing, I quote, his important achievements, in particular with respect to the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement on climate change, the advancement of human rights, including in areas of women's empowerment and gender equality and the United Nations reform, unquote. With that, I very much look forward to hearing the views of the eminent panelists here today on these and other issues of interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very comprehensive overall description on the UN and Korea's role in that sense. Especially thanks for your mention of the role of the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. We have just heard from two ambassadors. Now we are all set for the main discussion. We have five panelists, distinguished panelists here, and I thought it would be good if I hear from the custodian of the UN Memorial Cemetery in Korea about the overview of UNMCK's meaning in this forum. So, and then based upon his overview, ambassadors will speak on that basis. So, Ambassador Heo Kang-il, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests. First of all, I would like to express my deep appreciation to Busan Metropolitan City and Busan Foundation for International Cooperation for hosting this meaningful event. I'm very honored to be part of it, particularly with the presence of the Honorable Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the former UN Secretary General. I feel, actually this morning, I feel as if I'm attending another round of commission of the UNMCK, because last week, exactly here at the Westin Joseon Hotel, we had the annual meeting of commission. So it's very nice to see Ambassador Turner, our chairperson, and the Ambassador Sulber, our next chair, and the US Consul, Mr. Jae. Thank you, and very nice to see you again. The UNMCK, as we all know, the UNMCK is the only UN-designated cemetery in the world. On the occasion of the 70th anniversary of its establishment, it would be worthwhile to reflect upon the 70-year history of the UNMCK and think about what meaning the UNMCK carries today and what further role the UNMCK could play in promoting world peace and freedom in the years to come. During the Korean War, high numbers of UN casualties occurred, and the UN command needed a place to bury them. Busan was selected as the resting place of the fallen UN forces because it was a relatively safe city and it had a port, which meant it would be easier to transport injured or fallen soldiers. Since its establishment by the UN command in 1951, the UNMCK has undergone several changes. The operation of the cemetery by the UN command continued until 1959, when the Republic of Korea and the UN signed a relevant agreement on the establishment of the UNMCK. The name of the agreement is the agreement between the United Nations and the Republic of Korea for the establishment and maintenance of a United Nations memorial cemetery in Korea. According to that agreement, the ownership of the cemetery was transferred to the UN, and the operation of the UNMCK had been overseen by the UNCURK, a UN organization called the UN Commission for the Unification and Rehabilitation of Korea, or UNCURK. The operation of the UNMCK by the UNCURK, however, ended in 1973 when the UN General Assembly dissolved the UNCURK. As the UNCURK was disbanded by the UN General Assembly in 1973, the oversight of the UNMCK was entrusted to the current Commission for the UNMCK, consisting of 11 member nations that have their fallen soldiers interred in the cemetery. They are Australia, Canada, France, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Republic of Korea, South Africa, Turkey, United Kingdom, and the United States. Since its establishment in 1951, the UNMCK has gradually evolved from a barren field of white grave markers to an elegant memorial to the 2,311 souls who lie within its grounds. Photos from the 1950s and 1960s suggest that there was little here but white grave markers in an otherwise barren landscape. Today, the UNMCK has become a place of dignity and solemnity that boasts excellent landscaping and cleanliness. I believe the UNMCK today does not shrink from comparison with any other national cemetery in the world. This wonderful change has been made possible thanks to the concerted effort of the Korean government to invest in the development of the UNMCK, together with the strong support and valuable contribution of the UNMCK member states. In this sense, the development of the UNMCK has mirrored the development of the Republic of Korea itself. The Republic of Korea, once one of the least developed countries, has now become the 10th largest economy in the world. This peaceful and increasingly prosperous nation wholeheartedly expresses its gratitude at the final resting place of those upon whom that peace and prosperity depend. The story of the UN forces during the Korean War demonstrates what can be achieved when states unite to fight aggression. The UNMCK symbolizes the international alliance and coalition that came to the defense of the Republic of Korea. In the symbolic area of the cemetery, there are 22 national flags of sending states, a UN flag, and the Korean national flag, flown throughout the year to honor the interred here, while reminding us of the strong alliance of these countries. The UNMCK also symbolizes the eternal gratitude of the Korean government and people. The cemetery is a place where people get a glimpse of how much the Korean government and people appreciate the noble sacrifice and devotion of the UN forces. It is a place that constantly reminds Korean people that without the courage and noble sacrifice of the fallen heroes, today's Korea would not have been possible. It is often said that the Korean War is a forgotten war, but I think the UNMCK serves as a link between the past, present, and future because it constantly emphasizes the significance of peace and freedom. The cemetery also reinforces our understanding that there must not be another war on the Korean Peninsula, and to think about what we should do to prevent that. In that sense, it can serve as a place of education and a reminder of our history for our young people and future generations. It is encouraging that the Busan metropolitan city, which is home to the UNMCK, has been pursuing the goal of having the heritage of the Korean war capital of Busan inscribed in the UNESCO World Heritage List. The UNMCK is one of the main features of the proposed heritage. It is my sincere hope that the heritage of the Korean war capital of Busan will be inscribed in the UNESCO World Heritage List in the future, so that the UNMCK will be better recognized as a symbol of world peace and freedom worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Hao, for your detailed history of 70 years of UNMCK, and more importantly, the symbolic meaning of the eternal resting place for 2,311 fallen heroes. Thank you very much. It was very informative for us all. Now, moving on to Ambassador Philippe Turner, you may have something special to say than others, as not only as the representative of New Zealand, but also as the chair of the Commission for UNMCK. Now you have the floor.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. That's a greeting in Te Reo Māori, the indigenous language of New Zealand. So, good morning and Hamjashimnika. I'd particularly like to acknowledge the presence, as others have, of His Excellency Ban Ki-moon in joining us this morning for this important conference. So at a conference in San Francisco in October 1945, 51 nations, including New Zealand, hammered out a new charter for world relations. Today, there are 193 members, and the United Nations work reaches into every corner of the globe. As the theme of our session indicates, the UN has evolved considerably over that time, progressing from a guardian for freedom to a partner for development, now set out in the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, as a smaller country, New Zealand firmly believes in the need for good global governance to keep our planet safe, orderly, and prosperous. Even though we are geographically distant from most conflicts in the world, we have a proud history of contributing to efforts to make peace around the world. In 1945, New Zealand played an active role in establishing the United Nations. Now, we were not always successful in what we wanted. For example, we were among those who opposed the veto for the 5 permanent representatives of the Security Council, and we still hold that position today. More successfully, we advocated for collective security and for economic and social issues to be at the heart of the UN's agenda. The UN Charter allows it to take action on a wide range of issues that now extend well beyond international security to issues such as the environment, disaster relief, disarmament, human rights, gender equality, food supply, health, and refugee protection. Now, what can small countries like New Zealand or larger countries like Korea do to make a difference to such a large global agenda? My answer is that smaller countries are in fact the backbone of the United Nations. Larger countries are often tempted to go their own way and rely on their own power. Smaller countries cannot do that. We have little choice but to work with others in creating global institutions and norms of behavior, and in ensuring that they are implemented. And one immediate example is what we have just heard from Custodian Ho about the role of the United Nations Cemetery here in Busan. As noted, we have the honour as New Zealand to serve as the chairperson this year. And as the custodian has outlined, the cemetery is a unique symbol of the sacrifice of United Nations forces in the Korean War. That cemetery includes the bodies of 32 New Zealanders who served and died on the peninsula. And they were but some of the 6,000 New Zealanders who fought under the UN flag during the Korean War. By honouring the memory of those who fell, we are also reinforcing the values of the United Nations and the need to ensure the security of small states threatened by others. At the other end of the scale, like Korea, New Zealand has served several times on the United Nations Security Council. All countries have the opportunity to do so, but we need to be voted in. In New Zealand's case, we ran a 10-year campaign before we were successful in 2015. But our win proved that small countries do have a role to play at the UN. We used our time to represent the perspective of small states at the Security Council, particularly the many small states who make up the great blue continent of the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific and the many states within it is our region, our home, our backyard. We spend a lot of time working with those countries and trying to find solutions to the many challenges they face. At the top of that list is climate change. But the list also includes building democracy, good governance, combating disasters like typhoons and floods, finding ways to increase the prosperity and economic security of people living in small, vulnerable countries. New Zealand believes the Security Council should place a greater emphasis on conflict prevention and resolution, as proposed in Chapter 6 of the UN Charter. We advocate putting more effort into understanding and addressing the root causes of conflicts. We have been involved in UN peacekeeping operations since they began in 1948. Since then, New Zealanders have served in more than 40 operations in more than 25 countries, either under UN auspices or as part of coalitions. And that includes, of course, the Korean War. New Zealanders have served in some of the United Nations' most challenging missions, including in places such as the Sinai Peninsula, Timor-Leste, former Yugoslavia, Somalia, many parts of Africa, the Middle East, and the Pacific. Helping refugees is another priority for New Zealand. Conflicts and natural disasters have left more than 50 million refugees and internally displaced people in the world today. The Office of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees is the lead agency for protecting refugees and the internally displaced. That is, people who have been forced from their homes but are still living in their own country. Every year, as a signatory to the 1951 Convention on the Status of Refugees, we accept 1,000 refugees and their immediate families for resettlement in our country. New Zealand is one of approximately 27 countries with a regular refugee resettlement program. A further specific area of interest and of expertise for New Zealand is around removing landmines. Unexploded landmines continue to kill and injure civilians years after conflicts have ended. We are a strong supporter of the demining programs such as the United Nations Mine Action Service, and we have sent our Defence Force personnel to remove mines in areas such as the Palestinian territories, Lebanon, Afghanistan, Iraq, Mozambique, Kosovo, Cambodia, and Laos. Now, as you can imagine, all of these activities require a robust framework of international law and of law courts that can adjudicate and administer that law. New Zealand is therefore a strong supporter of the role of the International Court of Justice. We are one of only around 70 countries that have made a declaration accepting the jurisdiction of the ICJ over all our disputes. What's more, we have taken 2 cases to the ICJ ourselves. Both of those cases involved outlawing nuclear testing in the South Pacific. We were also involved in a 3rd case at the court, which involved prohibiting whaling in the Antarctica. And finally, and perhaps most importantly in the UN agenda, come the Sdgs, the Sustainable Development Goals. The 17 goals and 169 targets set out a universal agenda to achieve sustainable development globally, known as Agenda 2030. The goals integrate the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, such as economic, social and environmental development, and are applicable to all countries. We think hard about what these goals mean for New Zealand and what we can do to contribute to them. We understand that we need to contribute through a combination of domestic action, international leadership, and supporting other countries through our aid program. The private sector and civil society also have critical roles in achieving these goals, and we work closely with both. But above all, achieving outcomes will rely on action at the global level, such as through the United Nations and other multilateral bodies. So let me mention here a couple of initiatives which we prioritize right now. One is seeking to stop all illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. New Zealand is leading an initiative as a first step in that direction by agreeing to eliminate all subsidies that contribute to illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. A similar initiative where New Zealand is leading an international coalition of countries, including Norway, is to eliminate subsidies for fossil fuel. Given the enormity of the challenge we all face in combating climate change, it makes no sense at all for anyone in 2021 to be using taxpayers' money to encourage consumers to use fossil fuels. And we hope that the Korean government will be able to support us in this area. So in conclusion, let me stress that New Zealand is a strong supporter of the United Nations. We see much to be proud of since the United Nations was established 76 years ago. But we also see many, many challenges that remain in pursuing the vision laid out in the UN Charter. We are delighted to be able to work with Korea and with other partners such as Norway on these challenges. Whatever we achieve on this path, we are certain that the United Nations will be part of the solution. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Turner, for your very impressive statement on New Zealand's activities and contribution to the international community. I think, well, as one of like-minded countries, including New Zealand as well as Norway, we all agree and support your ideals and activities in the international arena, especially in the time when multilateralism is constantly being attacked. Now, I may go to Ambassador Frode Solberg of Norway. Norway is the country that produced the first Secretary General of the United Nations. And I personally visited Norwegian mission in New York, and I saw many pictures of the first Secretary General, Trygve Lie, and that gave me some idea. So I went back to Korean mission, and I gathered all the good pictures of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and I also displayed some of the pictures, and thank you for that idea. Now it's your floor is yours.
There we go. Thank you very much, Chairman. Dear Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends. First of all, also thank you very much for the invitation to take part in this distinguished panel. And I'm honored to join you at this discussion at the opening of the World Peace Forum today. This year represents an important milestone for the United Nations and the Republic of Korea relations, as we commemorate both the 30th anniversary of the Republic of Korea's admission to the UN, as well as the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the UNMCK, as we heard my colleague Ambassador who said. Let me start out by perhaps presenting a few perspectives from my side on the development of the relations between the Republic of Korea and the United Nations. you have experienced extraordinary success in combining rapid economic growth with significant reductions in poverty. Its experience in sustainable development, improving the life of the people, and transitioning to a dynamic knowledge economy provides lessons that can benefit many other countries on this planet. Over the past 70 years, this relationship has transformed itself from this nation from one of the poorest nations in the world into an economic powerhouse, as an example of liberal democracy, and as you heard as well, the 10th largest economy. The Republic of Korea's experience in sustainable development, providing infrastructure and better services to improve the lives of your people, and your transition into a dynamic knowledge economy provides lessons that can benefit also many of the developing countries. The relationship between the Republic of Korea and the United Nations goes all the way back to the first years of the organization, when it was led, as you said, Ambassador, by the first Secretary General, Trygve Lie from Norway. And I'm also quite proud to say that Norway, and he indeed played a very important role during the first critical stages of what became the Korean War, as he was able to gather the United Nations, to gather the Security Council, and mobilize support in a very short time. And Norway played a key role, as we were also a non-permanent member of the Security Council at the time, and of course was a strong supporter of the resolution that was decided. As we all know, back then, the United Nations was the guardian of freedom for the newly established Republic of Korea, a significant contrast to today's situation. The Republic of Korea, like Norway and New Zealand and the United States, is now among the largest contributors to the United Nations and an important provider of assessed contributions to United Nations peacekeeping operations. Norway and the Republic of Korea and other countries like New Zealand share a common interest in maintaining a well-functioning UN-led international system. Through strengthening the dialogue between our countries and joining forces, we can show a united front in support of multilateralism, and to ensure that a rule-based international cooperation is prevailing. Norway's always had a focus on being a consistent partner to the United Nations. Our support for the UN is predictable, it is recognizable, even with changing governments, as we have seen through our elections just a few days ago. But our policies remain the same. And even though we are not among the largest countries in the world, as Ambassador Turner said, Norway is now the 6th largest overall net contributor, and more than 42,000 Norwegians have served in more than 50 UN-led peacekeeping operations since 1949. And we continue to serve in Mali and South Sudan today. And of course, we were here during the Korean War with our frontline hospital called Normash. Norway has had a non-permanent seat, or we have a non-permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council for 2021 and 2022. So we're in there now. And this is the 4th time we serve as a non-permanent member of the Security Council. And in this role, we seek even closer cooperation within the United Nations, within the members of the Security Council, and of course also the Republic of Korea. We strive to be a fair player and listen to views of all sides. Building on our extensive experience in conflict resolution and peace building, Norway is contributing to finding solutions through pragmatic diplomacy. But talking about our relationship with the United Nations and being in the beautiful city of Busan, we also commemorate the 70 years that has passed since the creation of the United Nations cemetery here in this beautiful city. It is the only UN-designated cemetery in the world, where brave soldiers who gave up their lives for world peace and peace on the Korean Peninsula and for global freedom. Rest in peace. And I have to say that I take on this responsibility, and Norway takes on the responsibility, being humble, proud, as chair of the Commission from this November. And we will try to follow up the great path that my friend Ambassador Turner has laid out for us. I see from the program and the presentations later today will be oriented towards sustainable cities and climate change responses as well. And these are areas of common ambitions for Norway and the Republic of Korea. So in setting the stage for coming session, I would also like to say a few words about this crucial and important aspect and topic. As we are on the brink of, we have heard the past few days, Code Red, at least we're facing a very, very important meeting coming up in Scotland in just a few days. And we are living in a time where the concept of sustainable development, including the awareness of climate change, shapes our thinking and the way we do business. And we are facing, and we have to solve a number of challenges in order to reach the Sustainable Development Goals and our climate goals. A growing world population needs to improve its standard of living. And for this, we need greener energy. We need more efficient use of energy, and we need more affordable energy. As a Norwegian ambassador to Korea, I work on these subjects, whether it's offshore wind, hydrogen, the green transition, with many different organizations, many levels and business in Korea. And I think that together we can make this change happen. We need cooperation, we need the willingness, we need the political ambitions, but I think we can make this happen. And I would like to urge us all to do what we can do in order to reach the SDGs and to wish for a successful outcome in the meeting in Scotland. But let me finish by underlining the very close and useful cooperation we have between Norway and the Republic of Korea in many, many areas, and increasingly so in the new and exciting green transition areas. Our common expertise, our knowledge, our insight in the many areas that we work closely together on, as the maritime industry, energy, technology, will be useful in the future and part of this change. And I would also underline the close cooperation that we have and that we will continue to pursue in international organizations and in the United Nations. And we need more than ever to focus on cooperation, not least between, as was mentioned, between like-minded countries like us represented here in this room today. We need that to secure and to promote humanitarian assistance, sustainable development, human rights, and to fight poverty and to prevent climate change. To sum up, we don't need less cooperation, but we need more cooperation. We need more international cooperation. We need more multilateralism. We need more United Nations. Thank you very much.
I cannot agree with you more about the need for more cooperation in international society and also the upholding the value of multilateralism. Thank you very much, Ambassador Solberg. Now let's move on to David J., U.S. Consul in Busan.
Thank you. It's an honor to share this rectangular table with such a distinguished panel to mark such an important occasion. Thank you to the organizers and to the participants, and I join others in thanking Ban Ki-moon for his distinguished presence here. So just over 70 years ago, the flame of hope for a free, prosperous Republic of Korea was flickering on the verge of being extinguished. In 1950, the Busan perimeter was all that was left before UN forces were pushed into the sea. And later that year, a ship of miracles brought weary refugees escaping fighting in North Korea. And moving forward from this important turning point and eventual comeback of UN forces, the people of the Republic of Korea showed that this peninsula is a good place for miracles. Today, that war-ravaged country is a leading voice for peace, and that impoverished nation is a global leader in development assistance and innovation. Against the odds, the ROK has achieved the twin miracles of rapid economic development and deep democratization. Few could have predicted that from the smoldering embers of war, the Korean people would forge the bright future of the Republic of Korea today. As the world seeks to recover from the COVID pandemic, or in the words of the Biden-Harris administration, build back better together, we can take guidance from the priorities highlighted in the Sustainable Development Goals or the SDGs. When the UN adopted the SDGs, they could not have known a pandemic would become a global preoccupation. And now, as it seeks to re-energize UN member countries and their commitments to the SDGs, the UN leadership turned to the Republic of Korea. Specifically, they called on the help of Korean cultural phenomenon, BTS, who helped urge the UN member countries to get the SDGs back on track. BTS does the Republic of Korea proud, and also does Busan proud. I have to mention this since I'm the US representative based here in Busan, thanks to Jimin and Jungkook, who herald from here. So let's take a look at a few of the top SDG priorities. Of course, at the top of this is priorities of health. It is fundamental. It is both a destination and the means of achieving the other goals. To help get the world back on track, the United States just announced it would double its vaccine donation to low-income countries. To paraphrase President Biden at the COVID-19 summit last month, to beat the pandemic anywhere, we need to beat it everywhere. U.S. contributions pledged now stand at over 1 billion doses, doses that are made possible by the innovation of U.S. companies and production partnerships with advanced countries like the ROK. Together, we're helping to accelerate the path to recovery from COVID. Another top shared global challenge, and of course a priority for this conference as well, is climate change. Climate change and its disastrous effects will not wait until the end of the pandemic, and many of the world's most vulnerable nations will suffer its harshest impacts. Led by the distinguished statesman, Presidential Envoy John Kerry, the United States is seeking bold and courageous commitments by countries to bend the curve of steeply rising global temperatures and the accompanying disruptions that are ever-increasing threat to our food, water supply, and even the safety of our homes. At the US ROK Summit last May, we committed to ambitious 2030 targets to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions. We also committed to work together to mobilize climate finance for developing countries and to ensure existing international finance is aligned to promote our climate goals. Our forward-looking alliance will play an important role to building a future worth looking forward to. As for Busan, just as this city was an important launching point for retaking the peninsula years ago, it is in a unique position to help the global recovery. Under the leadership of Mayor Park and his capable team, and with the support of the ROK government, Busan is increasingly a city that links the countries of the Indo-Pacific region with each other and to the world. It is also key to the critical logistic links that are at the heart of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. To amplify and enhance collaboration on a brighter future, Busan is seeking to host the 2030 World Expo. In fact, Busan's proposed theme for the 2030 Expo, Transforming Our World, Navigating Toward a Better Future, echoes the 2015 UN General Assembly resolution that officially launched the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This is a theme that is even more poignant today as we seek to chart a path after COVID. Busan's commitment to the UN institutions and system is clear. The UN Memorial Cemetery and nearby Memorial Hall are visible symbols of that commitment. But what might be less noticeable than the buildings and impressive monuments are the people behind them. I recently had the privilege to meet student UN volunteers from Pugyang National University who work to understand and embody UN values. These PKNU UN supporters volunteer for work that ranges from cleaning the UNMCK site to teaching the public about the UN and the Korean War. During more travel-friendly times, these volunteers also organized events for Korean War veterans abroad. Their commitment to preserving the memory of events that happened long before they were born is an inspiration. It is also a testament that underneath the beautiful and somber hardware that is the UNMCK and Memorial Hall are the people and values which constitute the software that help it all keep going. In closing, I believe our shared history and the shared values of service, democratic governance, and principled economic growth help us overcome the adversities of the past. And now, as we look forward at the challenges near and far, these values will help us navigate the uncertainties and opportunities of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Before we further move on, I'm afraid that we have to excuse the Secretary General Pan for his next schedule. We all know he has promoted the values of SDGs and so on, but let's give him a hand. Why? Well, I was going to ask him a few words for us, especially when those students are in presence. He has not only promoted SDGs and climate changes. In promoting all those values, he emphasized also of the issues of youth, women empowerment, and the education and so on and so forth. So we all appreciate his work, and he's still energetic, and he is doing business as he's still the Secretary General in action. Now we'll hear from Ambassador Lee Kyung-chul for his statement. You have something else to say further? No? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. We still have some more minutes before we close our session. It struck me that David Jae, U.S. Consul in Busan, he was born in Korea, right? And you're representing the U.S. government in Korea. So you have two nations in your mind, first the U.S. and the second Korea as well. And this may be a little improvised, but may I ask you some idea to give the students, Korean students, about your idea about their future and ideas?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity. As you mentioned, I was born here, emigrated to the United States when I was 3 years old. I feel like it's a particular honor to serve and represent the United States in my birth country. I also think that it really embodies part of the values of the United States, which is its diversity and its inclusion. There was mention of refugees. We weren't quite refugees, but we were economic migrants to the United States, and there were opportunities that were presented, including the opportunities to serve the country here. And so I would invite the students to really broaden the scope of possibilities. And when you look at your future, I think that, I did not have this track, this railroad track towards becoming a diplomat or serving in government, but I was open to possibilities. And so I think that there are many opportunities that Korea opens up to its youth And those opportunities are not only within the borders, they are not only in the titans of industry that are brands and put Korea on the map and put Korea into households or transport people all over the world. It's not only those companies or the substantial economic development and other companies that abound, but it's actually the openness and participation and values that Korea has brought, as has been mentioned by others, this model for development, this commitment to values, the representation in many different types of international organizations. So I think that while the rate of economic growth is not as high as it once was, there is this brand Korea and the opportunities that the values and work of the previous generations have put on the ground, where you can be whoever you want to be. This is a little cliche, but there are many pathways to realizing your vision for the future. So yeah, take hold of the diversity and inclusion that is out there, and that includes your employment and the broader world where Korea has made such an important mark.
Thank you very much. It would be a very helpful advice to the youngsters in Korea. That gave me another idea whether Ambassador Turner or Ambassador Schulberg has any advice to the youngsters in Korea. Well, you may have 1 minute or two. Ambassador Turner, now that you have young Korean students here, you're New Zealand diplomat, so please go ahead.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to speak to young Korean students, and let me say that even within my embassy and the New Zealand Foreign Ministry, we also have Koreans, and that my deputy head of mission in Seoul is a New Zealand diplomat who's also a Kyopo, born in Korea, and who represents, I think, the new diversity of New Zealand, but that David has also referred to. Increasingly, our foreign service is highly diverse. We have 7 or 8 Korean-born diplomats serving New Zealand. And New Zealand, I think, had the honor of having the first Korean-born member of our parliament, the first Korean to serve in a parliament outside Korea. So we're very keen on diversity. My career, I have to say, is a little bit different from many. I don't like to speak too much about myself, but I think typically the diplomatic career is a steady escalator, or perhaps an escalator that sort of mostly goes up and occasionally goes sideways, but it's very difficult to get off and to get on halfway. You start out of university and you serve more or less successfully for 30 or 40 years, and then you retire. In New Zealand, we are keen to diversify away from that pattern, not because it's necessarily bad, but because we see greater opportunities to involve people with a diversity of experience. And I've been a fortunate recipient of that approach. I started in the New Zealand Foreign Service and spent 12 years there. And then I left when I was hitting 40 and joined the private sector. I joined a large New Zealand company called Fonterra, which makes milk and dairy products. And I had 18 years in business around the world, running businesses, including running our business in China for 3 years. And then unexpectedly, because I didn't think I would come back, I was persuaded to rejoin the Foreign Ministry and to take up this role as ambassador in Seoul 3 years ago. So I feel blessed to have had the opportunity to serve in both the private and the public sector. I know that's quite unusual, although there are cases in Korea, I understand, where that has happened. And personally, I find it tremendously beneficial, but perhaps more importantly, a lot of fun. I think we do have a sense that diplomacy can be seen as a special cult, like a church or a sect. You join, there are rules, there are ways of behavior, and a lot of that is important and good, but it's not all there is in the world. And I think I have found it enormously interesting to have experienced the business sector, the private sector. It's not as scary as it seems, and equally I think we owe, as diplomats, we owe it to our citizens to show that diplomats are not necessarily a special breed either, but we're human and we can all benefit from walking in each other's shoes and having a broad depth of wide experience. So I don't know if that's necessarily relevant, but it makes me a slightly different sort of career diplomat from some of my colleagues. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Turner, for your short but very helpful advice. Especially thank you for not speaking in native Maori language. And now, Ambassador Schulberg, yeah, you have a couple of minutes.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I have much more to offer in a way, but maybe to start with the, as Consul Jay said, maybe a cliche, but I think it's important to pursue and follow your dreams. I mean, there's room for everyone, and I think students today belong to a generation where you can actually make choices. And as Ambassador Turner said as well, don't be afraid to switch. I'm perhaps not the right one to say this because I've been a diplomat for now close to 30 years, and that's what I know. But I do have I have two children myself. One of them started out, took a bachelor degree, but found out halfway as he was writing his master's thesis, this is not for me. So he's changed completely and followed a new direction. Now he's working on a different master's degree. Maybe that was a year and a half or 2 years waste, but I supported him in that decision because I think in the longer term, he will be able to pursue a dream and to follow something that he would like to focus on for perhaps 10, 20, 30, 40 years, instead of working with something he didn't really want to. So I think it's important, and you do have time. Don't be impatient. And I really think it's possible for you today to do what you would like to do. There's room for everyone. And don't let others make choices for you, because you will be much more valuable as a part of society, as a part of your workplace, if you work with something you would like to work with. Having said that, I think your education is just part of this. The path will be made as you move along. So if you feel that you're sort of not fitting in with your studies, don't be afraid, because there will always be an opportunity. Your education is a platform. You will find interesting work in the future. So as I said again, don't be too impatient. The right opportunities will come. I think that's important to think about that. One final thing I would like to mention as well is that I'm a strong believer in that to be effective, good part of a company or a government agency or an organization, whatever you will find your job, I think it's important to set aside time for family life, both for men and women, and perhaps in Korea, even more importantly so for men. But I am a firm believer that you will be, as I said, effective and happy if you work with something you would like to, but you're also effective and happy if you have time to spend with your family, your children. So please, I would encourage you also to take that seriously as you move along. As a young student, take care of your closest, your friends, your family. That will give you much joy and pleasure and will make you a very happy citizen also in the workplace. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Schulberg. I see many heads nodding to your advice. One last, Ambassador Paguna is a very distinguished female diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. So she may have some wisdom to tell the youngsters in this room.
Ambassador Kim, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to say a few words before closing our round table. When I joined the Foreign Ministry in 1985, there were only 2 female diplomats before me. But now, newly recruited diplomats out of, more than 50% are female. It shows our society, Korea, has made great achievement, progress in terms of women status and the advancement of women's status, especially in public sector. But in private sector, still there is long way to go. And I'm very happy to see many female students audience today. And in your generation, Korean society, I hope it will be the very successful example to the world to show very meaningful progress in terms of gender equality. Gender equality is not just for the benefit of females, but it gives benefits to whole society and to whole humanity. So I hope you can make a further progress in terms of gender equality. But in order to make a success in your career, let me just emphasize on 3 P's. 1, most important, is passion. And the second, patience. And the last, but not the least, is practice. Practice makes you perfect. And one more thing I'd like to address beside gender issues. I'm so happy to hear Councillor Jie mention about the Busan candidature for 2030 Expo. And you remind me of the similarity between the United Nations and Expo. They share the values. The first Expo took place in London in 1851. The founder of Expo, the husband of Queen Victoria, at the opening speech, he declared that Expo is all about progress and peace. So progress and peace, it has remained the fundamental idea of Expo. And the key concept between the United Nations and Expo are same. It's about progress and development, peace, and humanity. And Busan, it put its candidature for 2030 Expo in order to, with a view to contributing to humanity and transformation. Busan represents actually a transformation from past to present, and also it presents transformation from present to future. So successful hosting of Expo 2030 in Busan, I'm quite sure it will contribute to the mission of United Nations too. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Park, and thank you all for tolerating the last portion of distraction. But it was very useful for not only for the gallery and the students, but also for us as well. And lastly, Ambassador Park mentioned passion, patience, and practice. I thought of fashion as well. You remind me of that word. forgive my joke. It's time to close up. Ambassadors spoke about New Zealand, Norway are small countries. Korea is as well. But even though we are small in size, we are, I would say, big in mind, which means we're not hesitating in extending our helping hand to the world who are in need of everything in terms of material as well as other support. We are contributing to the international community through peacekeeping, peace building, official development assistance, and so on and so forth. This some financial contribution is also important, and the Korean government is doing its best to raise the portion of its ODA contribution to the world. So I think we are like-minded in our values and in our orientation in the international community. Now, the day before yesterday, October 24th, was a UN Day, right? And when I was young, very young, I liked the UN Day very much because at the time it was designated by the government as official holiday. What kind of child would not like the holiday, not going to school? Well, but not more. Not because we value the United Nations less now, but simply because there are too many, excessively many holidays in Korea. So in terms of economical consideration, governments one day decided to cross out one holiday a year. That was UN Day. Freedom is not free. That is a phrase usually using in describing the Korean War. So we Koreans feel very much the meaning of the freedom, which is not free. My thanks goes to Busan Metropolitan City for its designation of UN weeks in Busan for 3 weeks, so that people can renew their appreciation and commemoration of UN, value of freedom, and most of all, remembrance of the fallen of 2,311 souls. These days, while we are struggling against the pandemic, narrow nationalism, myopic anti-multilateralism, and isolationism continue to be the source of our concern. That means, on the other hand, solidarity, international cooperation, and upholding strong multilateral system are all the more important for humanity and for our future. In that sense, today's roundtable, even though this is rectangular, I believe, showcased a strong reminder of what we should do for peace and for our future. Once again, my thanks to panelists, ambassadors, consul, ambassador, custodian, and also students for your participating for the 90 minutes. This concludes our session. Thank you.
attending this roundtable today.